Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we are continuing our journey to Endgame with the last film before Endgame, Avengers Infinity War. Um, so I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. Just a quick heads up, if you haven't seen Infinity War, spoilers, because I know that was a relatively recent film, and I know some people have been waiting until Endgame to watch it because they're so interconnected. Um, but this film was really what kicked off this whole thing. It's kind of the coming together of a lot of things, a lot of various threads and timelines that have been going forward with the MCU since pretty much almost its inception. Um, Thanos had a huge hand in the first Avengers movie. He's had a hand in a lot of the smaller movies in terms of the Infinity Stones and various things. Guardians of the Galaxy has a huge base around him because of Gamora and Nebula. So he's had his hands in the quote unquote MCU pie for a very long time. Um, Now, with Infinity War, the directors Joe and Anthony Russo have literally described it as what they believe to be what they qualify it as is a heist movie, and that's really what it is. And what I'm going to try and do, because there's so many moving parts in this film, I'm going to try and go through the individual timelines involving each of the stones, because there's basically individual things for the most part that involve each of the stones, and then it kind of comes together in the last act, or in the very last act, of a lot of different things kind of congealing together. So uh, let's go through the plot and let's examine the movie. Now, again, this has pretty much everybody in it, aside from Paul Rudd's Ant-Man, Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye, and Brie Larson's Captain Marvel. I think everybody, all the other Avengers are present and accounted for. So to start off, Thanos, we basically pick up almost immediately where Thor Ragnarok leaves off. Except it's after Thanos has already destroyed their ship. They've sent out a distress signal, but Thanos has pretty much beaten the living crap out of Thor. A lot of the half of the Asgardians are dead. Half were allowed to escape, and the only other ones that are left are Hulk and Loki and Heimdall, who Heimdall appears to be very much injured. Uh, Now, Loki appears to be relatively fine, and we find out that Thanos has already acquired the Power Stone, which he says that he has gotten from Xandar, which means he invaded Xandar and took the Power Stone. He also has the Infinity Gauntlet on already, and when we first see him, he is fully armored, although he removes that very shortly afterwards. So now he is after the next stone, which is the Space Stone, the stone that is inside the Tesseract. So Loki, Thor believes the Tesseract was destroyed in Asgard, but Loki took it from Odin's treasure room before Surtur blew up Asgard. So Loki then tries to offer it to Thanos, but it's really a ploy in order for Hulk to come in and defeat him. But Hulk is, after a little back and forth, Hulk is actually easily defeated by Thanos, which is, I think that surprised a lot of people when they first saw this movie, and that's not really that surprising, considering that Hulk has been able to ragdoll gods, and Thanos essentially knocks him the hell out in the early parts of the film. So, and again, this is only a few minutes in. This film is a non-stop action ride from beginning to end. And when it ends, it's like, holy hell, because you feel it in your body. It's kind of strange, because again, I just rewatched this movie because there's so many cogs and everything turning in this film that it's hard to keep track of what's going on, which is why I'm kind of dividing this up into storylines. Um, but Thanos winds up beating the Hulk, and Loki basically makes an attempt to kill Thanos and is then strangled to death and killed. And this is basically when Thanos gets his hands on the Reality Stone. He adds that to the gauntlet, and then he proceeds to blow up Thor's ship using the Power Stone. The ship explodes. We don't know if Thor has survived at this point. But we know that it appears that Loki is dead. Hulk was transported away by Heimdall. Heimdall was able to muster a small amount of magic from the Bifrost sword and transport Hulk and send him to Earth before before Thanos then killed Heimdall. So Heimdall is dead. Loki is dead. We already have a fairly good superhero body count going early on in this film. We also have no idea what the situation is with Valkyrie or Korg or Meek, but later on it was confirmed that they did make it off the ship. But as of right now, we're not seeing them, and we don't really see what happens to them, which I think is why the directors clarified that. Maybe if they release a director's cut, those scenes might be in there. But being that the movie is already 2 hours and almost 40 minutes long, I can kind of understand why those bits might have been cut out. So then Thanos is going to move, and he basically says that there are two Infinity Stones on Earth, and he's going to move. He wants the children of Thanos, who is the Black Order, which consists of basically these four superpowered beings that are kind of his, essentially like his like special operations, almost. So you have, God, I'm trying to remember their names. Um, Ebony Maw, Cull Obsidian, Proxima Midnight, and Corvus Glaive. So all four of those individuals are then dispatched to Earth to try and secure the Infinity Stones there, while Thanos proceeds to go to Nowhere. The place Nowhere from Guardians of the Galaxy, where the Collector has the Reality Stone in his possession. So now that we have, so Thanos now has the Power Stone and the Space Stone. So he's already a third of the way, and we're only about 10 minutes into the movie. The rest of the stones are really the main story of the movie, especially the Soul Stone, but I'll get to that. But the next one that they kind of go after is the Time Stone. So I'm going to go through that storyline first, and there'll be some characters that jump in and out, and I'll mention where they jump in and out and stuff like that. But essentially, we follow this because the Hulk is then sent to Earth, and he crashes through the Sanctum Sanctorum, which is run by Doctor Strange and Wong, and he crashes through their staircase and says Thanos is coming. Then we have the opening credits. So uh, Hulk has now reverted back to his banner form, and he doesn't really revert back to Hulk at all during the film. Hulk seems afraid or reluctant to come out because he's been defeated, so he refuses, and Banner really can't get him to come out. He tries to on multiple occasions, but he can't really. So we then go for a short scene where we see Tony Stark and Pepper Potts, where Tony's saying that he wants to have a family, he wants to have kids. I think they're engaged at this point because of Spider-Man: Homecoming, but I don't think they're married quite yet. And Doctor Strange essentially shows up with Bruce Banner and says, "Tony Stark, we need your help." There's some banter back and forth. I do enjoy the dialogue in this movie. I find it very interesting to see all these characters interacting with each other, especially Strange and Iron Man, because they have these huge egos, and it's kind of funny to see them go back and forth. And at one point, Strange even calls Tony Stark a douchebag, which is kind of funny. But this then leads to two of the Black Order showing up uh, to the Sanctum Sanctorum in New York. And this is also where we kind of mold Spider-Man into the fold. And he kind of joins up with Tony Stark and Doctor Strange and most of them. So now that we are kind of entering into this, basically Ebony Maw shows up in his spaceship, along with, I believe it is Proxima Midnight. No, not Proxima Midnight. That's the woman. Cull Obsidian is the other one who comes with him. So it's Obsidian Maw and Cull Obsidian. I keep saying Obsidian. So it's Maw, Ebony Maw, and Cull Obsidian. So I'm just going to use Maw and Obsidian because it's easier, and then the other two will be Midnight and Glaive. So now they're in New York and they're trying to get the Time Stone from Strange. Now Stark is basically telling Strange he has to get out of there. He has to put the Time Stone somewhere else, but he's unwilling to get rid of it. And he claims that he needs to guard it. This feels kind of stupid, but at the same time, you're believing in it because Strange is very confident in himself, and he is essentially the Sorcerer Supreme. We see bits and pieces of his powers in Doctor Strange, but now he has gotten to the point where he is a very very powerful sorcerer. He is not somebody to be trifled with. He is far beyond what he was in that film. Uh, so you have Iron Man and Doctor Strange versus Obsidian and Maw, and the fight that they have is really good. I enjoy the fight. Maw kind of has these telekinetic powers that really work out really well. It makes it very hard to hit him. Doctor Strange gets a few hits in on him, but ultimately Maw is probably the most powerful out of the four children of Thanos, or the Dark Black Order. Um, and they really work kind of really interesting on screen. Some of it is kind of delicate. There's a scene later on that I'll talk about involving some needles, but basically it's very delicate, and it works out pretty well. Just like looking and seeing what's going on. So through the fight, Iron Man is basically getting his ass handed to him by Obsidian when Spider-Man shows up, and together they're able to kind of fend him off. And Doctor Strange is able to, or Wong is able to send him through a portal to, I think it's the Alps, it's some snowy mountain somewhere. And when he tries to reach his hand back through, they close the portal and cut his hand off. But now you have Obsidian Maw, who is able to knock out and take Doctor Strange because he can't get the Time Stone out of its holder that is around Strange's neck. Uh, so Maw is able to get him and get him into his ship, and then flies away, where Spider-Man and Iron Man pursue. Now, Spider-Man is basically stuck on the ship as it's going into the atmosphere, and Iron Man, in order to save him, uses his what is the MCU version of the Iron Spider suit, which is kind of like a spider armor type of thing that he created for him, which we originally saw at the end of Spider-Man: Homecoming. Now he's actually wearing it, and it looks awesome. I love that suit. Um, but Spider-Man is then so now that they're on the ship, Tony Stark tries to get deploy the parachute from Peter Parker's suit and get him to go back down to Earth, but Peter is able to hang on and stays on the ship. Um, Now, jump ahead, because again, this goes in segments, so we're jumping ahead a little bit, where Peter Parker and reunites with Iron Man on the ship. Doctor Strange is being tortured by Maw, and they basically concoct a plan to get rid of him, which is pretty ingenious. And Peter Parker says, "Have you ever seen the movie Aliens?" Which is kind of funny that Peter Parker is kind of a pop culture nerd. That does make some of the things that he does kind of amusing. So they blow a hole in the side of the ship, and Peter grabs Doctor Strange as Ebony Maw is sucked out into space, frozen and killed. So this is a bit of an ingenious plan, but now that Strange is free, him and Iron Man basically have a confrontation where Strange wants to go back to Earth, but Iron Man says that he should continue to Titan. And his reasoning basically is they can set up a trap for Thanos, because Thanos is expecting to he's expecting essentially to run into Maw. They can set up a trap for him, and they can hopefully stop him and remove the gauntlet before he can complete his plan. Now, again, they don't know a whole lot. All they know is the stuff they've heard from Bruce Banner, and again, it's not a crap ton, because Bruce Banner only met him for a little while when he was the Hulk. So now they try to land the ship on Titan. It is not really successful, but after the crash landing, which destroys their ship, they then meet up with three of the Guardians. They meet with Mantis, Drax, and Star Lord, who don't know who they are. They engage in a fight, which is, again, the fight's kind of entertaining. So again, we have kind of a clashing of the egos, where Peter Quill, who's kind of even though he has an ego, he's a dipshit, is clashing with Tony Stark as Tony's trying to come up with a plan on how they're going to get the gauntlet off Thanos. Now, fast forward a little bit again, where Thanos now arrives on Titan with plans to get the Time Stone. At this point, he has grabbed the Power Stone, the Space Stone, the Reality Stone, and the Soul Stone. The Time Stone is the second to last one that he needs outside of the Mind Stone, which is still in Vision's forehead. So they have this great fight with Thanos. Doctor Strange actually has a really good monologue with him. They have this great fight, which basically leaves three of the Guardians incapacitated. Spider-Man desperately trying to make sure they're not sucked into a windpipe or thrown out into space. Doctor Strange is knocked unconscious, which leaves Tony Stark to do a one-on-one with Thanos. And this does not end well for Tony, because even though he's able to basically get a couple of hits in on Thanos, Thanos winds up ripping off a blade off of his new nanotech Iron Man armor and stabbing him through the midsection with it. But before Thanos can kill Tony, and again, Thanos knows who he is, which is kind of weird, but before Thanos can kill Tony, Doctor Strange gives him the time stone and basically explains to Tony that earlier, but right before this, Doctor Strange actually looked through the time stream and he looked through a bunch of different scenarios, and through that, only one of them did the Avengers come out victorious. And he said this basically says this is the only way. So now Thanos has the time stone. All right, so now we're going to do the rewind. Now we're going to do the whole rewind because we're going to go back and we're going to do we're going to follow the uh, basically the reality stone arc, which is relatively short, but we'll get into it. And that actually leads to the soul stone, which I will continue doing immediately after that. So we already know that the Guardians wind up meeting up with Tony Stark, but before that, they're the ones that respond to the distress signal on the ship from the Asgardian ship. So now that we are here, they find basically just the wreckage because the ship has obviously been destroyed by Thanos. They find the bodies floating everywhere, and Thor actually hits their ship and sticks on the window and he winds up opening his eye. Now, they bring him on board and revive him, and after they revive him, he basically says that he needs to kill Thanos. And Thanos is the one that did this, and he's going to Earth. Um, Thor then says there is only one place that he needs to go, and he needs to make a weapon that can kill Thanos. So he needs to go to the Asgardian Forge. And the Asgardian Forge is basically it's a facility that's been built around a star, and it uses the power of a star to melt down material to make Asgardian weapons. That's where they made Thor's original hammer before it was destroyed, and it's a place called Natavalir. So Thor proceeds to go off there while Rocket and Groot go with him. And Rocket basically just wants to go because he loves weapons, and Groot goes along with him as backup. So they decide to all go there. They take a little pod out of the Milano, the Peter Quill's ship, and they fly off there. Now, at the same time, the rest of the Guardians, Gamora, Star Lord, Drax, and Mantis, all go to nowhere because Thor informs them that Thanos is going to nowhere. He's going to acquire the other stones next, and he says that the Reality Stone is with the Collector on Nowhere. So the Guardians are then going to go there. Now, when I cover the Mind Stone, I'll go back to the Thor arc because it's very interesting to see where that goes, and then he winds up in Wakanda, and that's really where everything kind of wraps up in the film. But the Guardians then proceed to go there, but before that, Gamora basically has this heart-to-heart with Peter, and she says that basically she knows something that Thanos needs her for, and if Thanos gets his hands on her, he has to kill her. Because if she goes with him, he will be able to get the information from her somehow, and the universe will be destroyed because he will be able to get his hands on the one stone that he doesn't know how to get. Um, so Peter Quill reluctantly agrees to this. She makes him swear on his mother, which again is a very good interaction between the two. And this is really kind of the first, really what we would consider to be loving interaction between Gamora and Star Lord, where they're very open with their feelings, and it ends in a kiss. Of course, it gets the moment gets ruined because Drax is just standing there eating chips and watching the whole thing, which is very weird, but it still works. So moving past that, we then go into Nowhere, which the Guardians arrive at nowhere, and they then go to the Collector's, where his facility was, which seems to have been destroyed. Now, that could be remnants from when he used the Power Stone before, or when the Power Stone was used before and it was blown up, or it could have been from Thanos at that point. But we find out later on that basically Thanos has been using the Reality Stone. So Gamora attempts to kill him, and she is made to believe that she has stabbed him in the throat with her sword, and he lies dying. Unfortunately for her, he has already acquired the Reality Stone, and he has changed the area around him because he wanted to see if she still cared. And she breaks down crying when she thinks that she's killed him, which is, again, it's very bizarre. They do a flashback sequence not long before this where they show that, or not long after this, where they show that Gamora as a young girl on her home planet, and Thanos killing half the population, but he takes her aside and basically spares her, um, eliminating his own rule. And he shows her this little dagger thing with it has blades that come out on both sides, and talks about balance because he says it's perfectly balanced, just like everything should be. And he basically averts her eyes as half of the planet is half of the people in her city or her village are put to death by Thanos' soldiers. And it gives a background to Gamora which we really haven't seen before. And to keep in mind, she's very young at this point. She's been also ripped away from her mother. Um, and this is really when she is fully adopted by Thanos and brought back. And she still has the little knife that he gave her, the little double edged knife. So, going forward now, basically, Thanos reveals that it was all an illusion and takes Gamora. Drax and Mantis try and stop him, but they are both halted by the Reality Stone, which changes their forms. Drax turns into like a bunch of blocks that fall on the ground, and Mantis turns into some silly string or something that falls on the ground. Again, they go back to normal after Thanos leaves, because it seems like the way the Reality Stone works for the most part is it temporarily changes reality until the user stops using it, and then reality kind of reverts back to what it was before. So those two didn't die; they just changed into some weird forms and then went back to normal. Um, so it comes down to Peter, and he basically threatens to shoot Thanos in the head, which won't do anything because Thanos is basically more powerful than the Hulk. So shooting him in the head with anything, unless it's something insane, probably is not going to do anything. So we have this great moment where he realizes that he's going to have to kill Gamora, the one thing that he never wants to do because he loves her. And we have this moment where they're locking eyes, and she's begging him, and he says that he said she made him promise, and he just says he loves her, and she says she loves him, and then he pulls the trigger, and bubbles come out of his gun. And obviously Thanos was not going to let him kill her, and so he basically comments that he likes Star Lord because he had the balls to go through with that, but because he didn't know that bubbles were going to come out of the gun. Um, and Thanos then disappears through a reality portal, taking Gamora with him, and he has now acquired the Reality Stone. Um, so now we're going to go down the timeline for the Soul Stone, and the Soul Stone is a bit complicated. Um, where the Soul Stone, basically, Gamora knows the location of the Soul Stone. She's the only one that knows. And Thanos brings her back to his ship because he has Nebula there. Nebula tried to kill him, and she didn't succeed, and he took her hostage, and he's been torturing her, and he brings Gamora in and tortures Nebula in front of her, threatening to kill her if she doesn't tell him what where the Soul Stone is. Um, so eventually she caves, and she said that it's on the planet Vormir. And again, we're never given any context to where Vormir is, but it's just okay. It's there. She discovered it, and the reason why Thanos knows is because he was able to probe Nebula's memory since she's an android, and apparently Gamora told Nebula that she found the Soul Stone, even though she's been telling him the entire time that she never found it. Um, so now Thanos and Gamora go to Vormir to get the Soul Stone, and we get one of the big reveals of this movie that people were not expecting, and that is the Red Skull. And apparently, the Red Skull, when he was transported out of the plane in Captain America: The First Avenger, by the space stone. He was transported there for some reason. He thinks it's to, some weird sort of karma thing where now he has to guard over the stone. But essentially, he is the guardian of the soul stone, and he says in order for somebody to use the soul stone, uh, they must sacrifice the thing closest to them, the thing that they love. And Gamora, this is a really, really great scene. This is an emotional scene, and it's really our first. Uh, what I would say, I mean, I guess you can't say that because Loki and Heimdall died at the beginning, but this is our first character death since then. We have kind of the shock value at the beginning, but now we have this, and Gamora starts laughing and says that Thanos doesn't love anything. And now the universe has basically shut the door on his little plan, and he turns around and cries, and she thinks he's crying because he's a man child essentially. His journey, his plans have failed. He's crying over spilled milk essentially. But Red Skull says he's crying uh, because he's mourning, because he knows what he needs to do. And that's when Gamora kind of realizes exactly what's going to happen, because she is the only thing that Thanos actually loves. He actually he legitimately cared for her as a daughter. And he then grabs her by the arm, and they cut the sound in this scene, which I think is very good. Or they dampen it enough where you don't hear the screams at full thing, and it's almost like being in a bubble and watching it, and kind of like you can't reach. You want to reach out and say no, 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 stop, but he keeps going, and he tosses her off of this huge cliff. She falls down. We don't see the impact. We see one cut of the fall, and then we see a cut of her on the ground, and we see a pool of green blood forming around her, and she is dead. And because of that, Thanos is able to acquire the Soul Stone. Um, and this is one of the. Basically, the Red Skull explains it as the Soul Stone is so powerful that in order to wield it, the user needs to sacrifice something close enough to them to make them worthy of the power. And a soul for a soul, essentially. And you need you need a sacrifice of something living that is very meaningful to you in order to wield the Soul Stone. So we go through that, and now Thanos has the Soul Stone. Now we're going into the last one, which will lead us up to the climax of the film, which is the Mind Stone. Now, Thor, Rocket, and Groot have all gone to the forge, and when Thor gets there, he finds that the forge is shut down, which has never happened before, and he doesn't know why. So they enter, and they find that the place is empty. There's nothing going on until they are attacked by a giant who is played by Peter Dinklage. They call them dwarves, but they're really like 12 feet tall, so they might as well be giants. And Peter Dinklage explains that Thanos came there, and that's where they made his gauntlet, because they forced Peter Dinklage to make it in order for his people to survive. Otherwise, Thanos would kill them all, and he got the gauntlet and then proceeded to kill them all anyway. And the only person they left alive was Peter Dinklage, because he said that he owed him, but he owes him his life, but his hands belong to Thanos, and he cut his hands off. And his hands have now been replaced with what looks like metal or stone prosthetics. Um, and Thor then also informs him that Asgard has been destroyed, and Thanos is looking for the stones. And he's found quite a few of them already. So Peter Dinklage then agrees with Thor that they need to make a weapon. They need to make a king's weapon, is what Peter Dinklage refers to it as. And that weapon is Stormbreaker, which not only is more powerful than Mjolnir, it has the ability to use the Bifrost, much like Heimdall's sword. So Thor now has the ability to transport himself wherever he needs to go, and he has the ability to wield his thunder through his hammer once again. But this is a hammer axe, so this thing is brutal. And Thor, at this point in the story, he's pushed by rage and revenge and mourning and everything, because his entire and they go over this. He has a conversation with Rocket on the ship where they go over this, and they said that his mother is dead, his father is dead, his sister is dead, his brother is dead, his people are mostly dead. He has nothing left, and he literally is going to do everything, even if it kills him, to kill Thanos. Because if it's the last thing he does, it's going to be, even if it's the last thing that he does, he's going to do it. And the problem is they managed to restart the forge, but they can't open the shutter for the starlight to come through and melt the metal. So Thor offers to open it himself, which will cause him to basically take a dying star to the face. And Peter Dinklage essentially says this will kill him. But Thor disagrees, and he does it anyway. And they barely manage to get enough time where they're able to forge the weapon, and they can't find the handle, so Groot actually uses one of his arms and forms it into the handle and then breaks it off of himself to actually give it Stormbreaker. And we leave off kind of there where Thor is able to levitate the hammer with his lightning powers and bring it to him. And then we're going to cut off there for a little bit because really the story of the Mind Stone, for the majority of it, it happens back on Earth. So we're going to jump back a little bit and we're going to go into where we have Vision and Wanda. And basically, the bigger part of this is that after the Sokovia Accords, Captain America broke everybody out of the raft. Now, Paul Rudd's Ant-Man and Hawkeye both took deals because them on the run would be too hard for their families, which is why Paul Rudd is under house arrest in Ant-Man and the Wasp. And Jeremy Renner, as Hawkeye, is presumably off with his family. So that's kind of where they explain where those two are, even though we kind of know where Ant-Man is now that we've seen Ant-Man and the Wasp. So now the other Avengers are lying low. So we have Captain America, Black Widow, Sam Wilson, and Scarlet Witch, who are all basically on the run. So what's happened now is Scarlet Witch has actually entered into an actual relationship with Vision. Vision has found the ability to make himself look human so he can blend in plain sight. So it actually looks like Paul Bettany instead of just, a red and green CGI looking face. So those two are now in a relationship, but Vision is having problems because the stone that's in his head is telling him things, and he's not really sure what that is. But we basically have a scene where the two of them are contemplating whether or not they want to run off together and leave their respective teams and just live out their lives somewhere else, because they know that if they stay with the Avengers, they can't be together because of the Sokovia Accords separating the two groups. So, in an earlier scene as well, Bruce Banner is able to use the phone that Tony Stark gave to Captain America, and he calls Captain America and basically tells him that Thanos is on the run. They need to find Vision. And I forget exactly. I believe it's Dublin or somewhere in Ireland. I think is actually where the two of them are, and they're kind of they've basically both gone off the grid for a period of time before that. So now Captain America. We know that the others are looking for him because Bruce Banner has contacted Captain America now that Iron Man's off in space. So. Uh, Vision and Scarlet Witch are seeing on the news what's happening when Vision is suddenly attacked by why am I forgetting his name? It's not Proxima Midnight. It is the other one that's running around. Not Obsidian Maw. Corvus Glaive. So Glaive has not an actual glaive like in Krull, but he has basically a spear or a crescent blade on the end of a spear or a staff, and then the other Proxima Midnight has an actual spear. So we have this little action scene where Vision and Scarlet Witch are battling these two, and they wind up losing. And Vision basically says that she has to destroy the Infinity Stone that's in his forehead. So the fight does not go very well for the two. Vision is injured several times because apparently Glaive has a weapon that can prevent his phasing, and they state this explicitly. But before they can deal the final blow, Captain America and his team show up and then proceed to they injure Glaive and draw Midnight back. But they are able to both escape before they can be killed, and Captain America and his crew take in Vision and Wanda, and they basically come to the conclusion that there are couple of different ways they can go about this, because they meet with Bruce Banner, who is at the Avengers facility, along with Don Cheadle. And there's actually a really good exchange between William Hurt as Thunderbolt Ross yet again, and Don Cheadle and Captain America, where they both basically tell him to go shove it because the world is getting screwed up. So now that they've gone past that point, Bruce Banner uh, or Captain America claims that there might be another way, because Vision wants to destroy the stone so that Thanos can't have it. And his whole thing is that, if Wanda can overload the stone, she can destroy it, even though it will kill him. So when he tries to get her to do it, but basically they get interrupted and they say there might be a way around it. And the only place that they know of that they can get this stuff done is in Wakanda, and Shuri might be able to help them because of Wakandan technology. So the entire group goes there. We also find out that uh, information has been relayed to T'Challa about what might happen. So he goes and contacts the Winter Soldier, who has been thawed out now, and he's been basically living on Wakandan land in a cottage by himself. And now that the Thanos' forces are coming, uh, they give him a new vibranium arm, and they said, we're going to need you. So everybody shows up. We have a little reunion between Cap and Bucky, but then Vision is brought up into this observation room, where Shuri begins working on him, but she says it's going to take a while. It is not going to be easy to. They said they can do it. They can change his mental physiology and get the stone out without killing him, but it's going to take a while. So we then go to the battle where the remaining members of the Black Order, Midnight, Glaive, and Obsidian, who was picked up from the mountains, I assume, grab their army of Outriders, which are these like six-armed alien things, and they then uh, land in all these ships outside of the Wakandan shield, the shield that surrounds the city, and they basically come up and say that they're going to give up the Mind Stone, or they will all die. Um, then we have the final battle, which is everything just gets thrown together. The Wakandan army is there. All of the armies from the film come together, including the Gorilla Tribe. They all come together, and they all wait at the shields until the Outriders basically overwhelm the shields to an extent where they have to start letting them through and start killing them. But they only let a small sliver through, so they're basically bottlenecked until they release these big spinning wheel things. Again, I'm not going to go over this too much, but essentially throughout the battle, the three members of the Black Order are all killed in various ways, but Vision and Wanda are both forced out of the chamber that they're in, and Shuri is incapacitated, which means that getting the stone out of his head is now kind of at the back burner to making sure they don't all die. But now, after everything's all said and done, the forces of Thanos are close to being defeated. But now Thanos shows up, and he has the other remaining five stones already, because this is immediately after he has gotten the Time Stone. So he shows up now on the battlefield, basically right where the Avengers are, and he basically just swipes them all aside so easily, with all of the Infinity Stones going at the same time. He just wipes them aside. Now, meanwhile, not long before this happens, Thor shows up, because everybody else is almost overwhelmed, and Thor is able to use the Bifrost to show up with Stormbreaker, Rocket, and Groot, and together they are able to turn the tide and ultimately destroy a lot of Thanos' army. Now that's important to note, because Thor being on the battlefield is really what causes this last few scenes, which I really enjoy, the last few scenes of this movie. But Thanos is able to wipe everyone aside, and he tries to get Vision, but Scarlet Witch is able to overload the stone at the last second and destroy it, which kills Vision, but at the same time prevents Thanos from getting the stone. Now, herein lies the problem, is Thanos has gotten the Time Stone. And we've seen how the Time Stone works from Doctor Strange. And Thanos is able to reverse time to where the stone is still intact and removes it from Vision's head, killing him. He then puts it in the gauntlet, but before he can activate it, Thor shows up and impales Thanos in the chest with Stormbreaker. And again, this is a great scene where Thanos is. He looks like he's almost mortally wounded. He's actually been hit by Stormbreaker. He might die, and he just kind of smiles. And it takes him a couple of times to get it out, but he says, "You should have gone for the head." And then he snaps his fingers, and we have the quote unquote the snap heard around the universe, where Thanos then disappears, leaving Stormbreaker behind, and going off to his little planet. But we see him at the end of the film. He has acquired all the Infinity Stones, and he has done what he wanted to do. He snaps his fingers, and half the universe is gone. And we see half of our heroes disintegrate. Bucky disintegrates right in front of Cap. Falcon disintegrates. T'Challa. Um, a lot of the Wakandan army, a whole mess of people. Wanda goes, just a whole mess of people are just gone. And then we go back to Titan, and the remaining Guardians leave. Oh, sorry, Groot also in Wakanda. He dies, or he gets dusted. The remaining Guardians go. And then probably the most heartbreaking one of the movie is Spider-Man, and really it's this moment between Tony and Peter where Peter's grabbing on to him and saying, "I don't want to go. I don't, Mr. Stark. I don't want to go." And it's such a gut wrenching moment because you know how young Peter Parker is in this timeline. He's only 15, and he's barely even had a chance to live his life, and now he's dying on an alien planet for no reason. Well, not for no reason, but he's dying on an alien planet, and Tony is just sitting there, and he can't do anything about it. He can't stop it. He can't fix it, and he has to see him die and fade away, and it's so powerful at the end of that film. And then with the Avengers defeated, we go to Thanos on his little planet, and he has this little vision of Gamora as a little girl, which we think may have been him crossing over to the afterlife and then coming back, something like that. And she asks him if did he do it, and he says yes. And she says, what did you have to sacrifice? And he says everything. And then we meet Thanos on his little planet, and then it cuts to black, and the movie's over. And wow, this is a taxing watch. It really is. Not taxing in a bad way, but just a heavy watch where just things are happening left and right, which is why I kind of divided this up into these separate storylines. And you get to see, what all the Avengers are doing. They're all separated. This is the direct result of a lot of the Phase 3 stuff. The Thor Ragnarok plays a major role in this. Civil War plays a major role in this, even though it's set years after those events because the Avengers are split up. They're not together. They're separated when this comes together, and instead of being one united unit, everybody kind of gets separated and kind of goes their different ways. People get bumped off left and right in this film. I mean, like I said, there is a lot. Even with before the snap, there was a lot of death in this film, just from what Thanos can do, and it is so powerful to watch this movie. And I have to say, this is the best MCU film I have ever seen, bar none. And I hope that Endgame can top it. Endgame will be longer, but I hope that it can top it. And I have nothing but praise for Josh Brolin as Thanos because this made his character so three-dimensional. It made him so alive, rather than what we had seen in Guardians of the Galaxy and that little glimpse at the end of Avengers. Now Thanos is a full-fledged character because we find out that he wants to do this because he needs to balance the universe. He needs to make sure that there's too many people and there's not enough stuff to go around. There's so much that we see of him in this movie because this is really more or less Thanos' movie. The Avengers kind of take a backseat. They're just kind of there to try and prevent him from doing this, even though there's character developments for some of them, especially Tony Stark and Thor. But it's really powerful, and I love this film so much. I can't say enough about it, enough good things. And if I was to give this film a rating, I would have to give it 10 finger snaps
You should have gone for the head.
out of 10. And with that, we have worked our way through the Endgame, through our journey to Endgame until we are actually at the film. And I will be seeing the film tonight. And then tomorrow I will be putting up a spoiler-free review, which will be the last video in the Journey to Endgame series. And we will be done with this for hopefully another 10 years. But uh, I'll talk to you all guys then. So thank you for listening in. If you've listened to these videos all the way through, remember leaving the comments anything you want to leave. Hit the like button, hit the bell for notifications, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?